wherever you may be, however you may be listening. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the Cardinals on SI podcast. I am Donnie Drew, and that is Alex D'Agostino. Before we get into all the fun and nitty-gritty stuff we're going to get into today, go to comment, like, subscribe to the channel. All the support is definitely appreciated. Follow Alex on Twitter at AlexDagAZ. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie Drew. And Alex, it's a really fun time to be in the desert. Spring training is practically here. D-back season is going to be here before you know it. You cover the D-backs. Check out his wonderful coverage at si.com/MLB/Diamondbacks on SI. I think that's how it goes. Who knows, man?
You'll find
something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. We're here for vibes only. We're here to talk Cardinals and the very oddly timed reporting that came out last night. I was getting ready to load up PlayStation, 10 p.m., finally relaxing after a busy day, and just a slew of reports. I do want to give a shout out to Matt Zenitz, the CBS national reporter, because we've been very vocal about national guys not necessarily being on the ball whenever it comes to reporting on the Cardinals. He's been killing it. Like, he's been absolutely phenomenal. So shout out to him. A slew of coaching changes and some being retained coming through for the desert. I want to give a shout out to John in the chat. Much appreciated, my man. Nick Rallis obviously returning to the desert, confirmed by numerous reports. Now, there were some other hires too. We're going to get to Rallis here in a second, Alex, but just some other hires that I wanted to touch on. Justin Friday, off the line coach, will be retained. Matt Schaub being hired on as the quarterbacks coach. Michael Gobriel being the new special teams coordinator. He comes on from the New York Giants in that previous role. And then Jake Moreland, the previous Broncos and Houston Texans tight ends coach, coming in to essentially factor into the same role. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Justin Fry was one of the more, I think he was kind of in demand, like when the Cardinals first hired him. I don't have a problem with retaining him. He's not Clayton Adams, but I think for what he was working with, I think we saw some development out of the offensive line. They didn't play well cohesively, but that's a different story. The Matt Schaub hire just makes me feel old. I mean, I remember watching him sling it on Sundays, and now he's the quarterback's coach. So that's pretty interesting. The other two guys, kind of just feel like change for the sake of change, not necessarily for better or worse. They just kind of, it's just new regime, new guys. The special teams was not great last year under Jeff Rodgers, but there was also a lot of injury issues there as well. I don't know how much of that was just maybe Chad Ryland missing some kicks. They didn't have Blake Gillikin for the majority of the season, but the tackling was also really bad. So, you know, we'll see how that goes. And then I'm a little surprised that they hired a new tight ends coach, because kind of felt like tight end was one of the best positions on the field, and has generally been, but also you never know if that's just Trey McBride being Trey McBride. But I feel like we saw a lot out of like Elijah Higgins too that I kind of liked. So yeah, you know, it's not earth shattering, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I would agree, man. I think really to answer some quick questions, I was going to play College Football 26, leading these Kennesaw State Owls. And then if I see one more Carson Palmer comment about me looking like him, I'm going to lose it.
What's up, Brian?
What's up, Brian? Thanks for checking us out, bro. Yeah, Justin Fry, I think, was maybe the most surprising name off of this list. Just giving the step back, but you really don't know how much of that was Clayton Adams being gone while also having a major hand in the running game. And then it's just injuries, man. Like, we talk about injuries being a big thing on the defensive side of the ball, which we're going to get into here in a little bit. But outside of Paris Johnson Jr. at left tackle and Yelda Froholt at center, it was kind of like musical chairs at left guard, at right tackle. So maybe Fry didn't have a lot to work with year one, but also you can make the counter argument as a coach, like, you're supposed to maximize the talent of every guy on the depth chart, and it didn't necessarily feel like that was being done. Isaiah Adams kind of had the up and down year. John Gaines seemed to have some promise at left guard, but like, these are only small sample sizes that we're working with. So TBD on the Fry hire. I do like the Schaub hire. I do. Yeah. I think I like it because I think eventually we all know Kyler Murray could be very much on the way out in 2026, maybe even beyond that. I think eventually the Cardinals are going to get a new quarterback somehow, some way, some fashion. I think giving him a quarterbacks coach that has a fresh perspective playing in the game, like it's like Schaub didn't just play in the 80s and the 90s, and like it's not like he's been around coaching for forever. Like he has a somewhat modern grasp on what NFL offenses and concepts looks like, and I think that's going to be a little bit beneficial, especially with LaFleur having such a big hand in what the offense is going to look like, especially with Nathaniel Hackett being the offensive coordinator, and he's not calling plays for everybody with the pitchforks and the torches. Like, Nathaniel Hackett's not going to be calling the plays here. I think Schaub's a fine hire. I don't lean one way or other against it, but I do think I like it. Go Brewers, whatever. He's been with the Giants the last 2 years. I don't think they've had phenomenal special teams play, but I think after what we saw from Jeff Rodgers last year, that couldn't happen again. Like that, and like it sucks because Rodgers, largely for his tenure in Arizona, was very good. He was a very good special teams coach. But like you alluded to a little bit earlier, between the fumbles, between the missed blocking assignments, between the missed tackles, like it was just all a collective, you know what, storm. And that just couldn't happen again. And then Borland being hired as the tight ends coach, it's whatever because you have a Trey McBride. And that's kind of the luxury that you get whenever you have arguably the NFL's best tight end there at the position.
It's like when Tom Brady's your quarterback and you have a quarterback's coach. Shout out Jeff Fish.
Right. You know, I think they could promote me to tight ends coach, and I would look pretty damn good like, coaching Trey McBride. But I think all in all, like these hires needed to happen. We're 2 weeks away from the NFL Combine, and they were scrambling to assemble a coaching staff. I feel like they had a hard deadline of, hey, like in 2 weeks, we're going to be in Indianapolis talking to these college kids, trying to assemble our draft board and get medical information from them. We need to have a staff in place. And whenever push came to shove, these were the guys that are going to end up kind of filling everything out. So get Timu Kevin Smith. And then he also adds Matt Schaub and the Cardinals have overlap. Yeah, LaFleur coached Schaub, if I do recall correctly.
He was an assistant. Was he assistant quarterbacks coach? He was some kind of offensive assistant.
Something like, dude. It feels like Michael Flores and everything, but Phil the Gator cooler up on the sidelines at some point for NFL teams. John said, I just hope Rallis can get some solid assistants around him. John, that's a very good segue, my man, because the big hire or retainment, I guess, is Nick Rallis is staying in the desert for 2026 and possibly beyond. Alex, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I just want to get your 2 cents before I start yapping even more.
Yeah. I'll say why it was not the worst idea, and then I'll say why it could be a bad idea. So, first off, I'm not that surprised. I think the writing was on the wall that this was going to happen. You looked at all of the different guys that they interviewed, the Aubrey Pleasants, the Charlie Bullens, all these guys that were kind of like these unknown guys that were assistants. And to me, I looked at that and I said, okay, they could be really good. Aubrey Pleasant is a rising coach. Nick Rallis was also a rising assistant coach with not a lot of experience when they hired him. So to me, it was like, if you're gonna do a complete reset, you had to go out and get somebody like a Wink Martindale or a Gus Bradley. Not that those guys would have been amazing, but if you were looking to make a change and to make a philosophical change or a fundamental change to your defensive coaching staff, you can't just go out and hire the next flavor of Nick Rallis and pray that the Rams got it right with their version of him. At this point, it's fine. I think the players liked him. The league likes him. And we saw 2 really good years out of Nick Rallis before 1 really bad year out of him. With that out of the way, I think it was a really bad look to not be able to bring someone else over. It's a really bad look that you lost out on Gus Bradley, who you were going to give more money to. Again, not that he would have been amazing, not that that would have been the best decision, but it feels very much like a Cardinals. Well, we couldn't get what we were looking for, so I guess we'll just keep him. I guess we'll just keep Nick Rallis. And I also don't like what we saw from Nick Rallis in terms of development. And that's not all on him, but it felt like the players that were young, that were supposed to be the next wave of good players, never got better. Why is Darius Robinson the worst defensive tackle in the NFL? Why is Max Melton getting benched in year two? Like it doesn't make sense. So I think there's some stuff that happened that you can't blame on Rallis. I think we saw him do some good stuff, but I'm just not willing to say this was a good move yet.
Yeah, I think for me it was a little expected, but not at this point in time. And like I'm getting deja vu from the path the Cardinals took to get Mike LaFleur. It's like, okay, like Mike LaFleur was like a likely candidate to get the head coaching job. But like just like the way the Cardinals went about it, like they interviewed several outside defensive coordinator candidates. It appeared very obvious they wanted somebody else besides Nick Rallis. But the caveat was either we're going to get an inexperienced guy who just blows us away in interviews, or we're going to try to get a Raheem Morris, Anthony Weaver, Gus Bradley, like Wink Martindale. Let's bring him in for an interview. I've been very vocal about the Cardinals needing to surround Mike LaFleur with experienced play callers on both sides. Like that's not a secret. I think that was the big caveat. Hey, this can be a home run hire as long as we do this. Technically, Nick Rallis does have play calling experience, right? 3 years of it under Jonathan Gannon, and Gannon was not the defensive play caller. Like I do think he had a hand in game planning, obviously being a defensive minded coach, but it was Rallis's show. It was Rallis' show in 2024 whenever things were really good. And it was Rallis' show in 2025 when things were very, very bad. I think it's not the best look for the Cardinals to openly swing and miss on a handful of coordinators and then have to kind of resort back to Rallis like, hey, are we still doing this thing? Like, from my understanding, he was still on their contract. So it's not like they had fired him or had let him go. And I'd be willing to bet Jonathan Gannon, whenever he took the Packers job as their defensive coordinator, try to get Rallis to come over with him to Green Bay. I'd be willing to bet a handful of monopoly money on that. But Alex, I look at what the defense looked like. And we have to remember the defense got basically all of its capital from free agency and the NFL draft invested into it last year. A heavy amount of money in free agency, all but one draft pick going to the defensive side of the ball. They put their chips all in on Nick Rallis in a pivotal third year of running the Cardinals defense, elevating everybody. And you get into injuries, and injuries did play a massive part in it. Like, I think to really show that the last 4 out of 5 games, Alex, the Cardinals defense allowed 37 or more points in the last 4 out of 5. Like they were at a point where it was me and you playing on the roster, and they were just getting lit up week after week after week. How much of the Cardinals' poor defensive outing in 2025 was on coaching, and how much of it was on injuries? And that's a very big question that Michael Bidwell has to answer, or already did answer, because if we are going to blame Jonathan Gannon for a lot of the defensive fallout that happened last year, he wasn't even the play caller. He wasn't running the show. Jonathan Gannon was a very hands-off head coach, for better or for worse, right? And we said that whenever into the super chat, we said that whenever the offense was going very, very astray for Gannon on Drew Petzing, right? Like, Gannon needs to intervene. He needs to do this. And then people are justifying Nick Rallis coming back. It's like, okay, well, like if we're firing Jonathan Gannon for the poor defense and he didn't even call plays, why is Nick Rallis still around?
Yeah. It's interesting. So our friend Hank Hill in the chat made a good point. It's hard to
it's always a good day when Hank Hill
pulls up. Well, that one's a good one too. The other comment, though, hard to rally for the terrible offense. I don't wonder if it was really more of just a mental thing and really more of just an overall like, well, why bother, right? Which isn't good, and that's on coaching and the players separately, and that's a whole separate conversation. But I don't wonder if a lot of those numbers, how you say like, oh well, the offense was really good in the second half. It's like, well, okay, well that's all garbage time. How much of like the defensive problems were like happening when the games were already pretty much when the season was over and the games were already over? And so I don't know if we got like a full view at what that roster could do before the entire thing just went off the rails. I do think the fourth quarter defense in particular was my biggest concern. The inability to close out games, the inability to get off the field on third down.
Yep.
Like it's that kind of thing. And here's my biggest question is with the Gannon situation. Obviously, he wasn't calling plays. He was very hands off. But my question is, was there a philosophy from the top down coming from Gannon that was this: we won't get beat over the top, we won't overextend ourselves and get beat, right? And the problem was, what that meant was everybody and their mother was wide open on 3rd and 25 for a first down, right? So it was like, well, we're not going to get beat for a 50-yard touchdown, but we are going to get beat for a 7-yard gain every single play, because they were playing soft zone and rushing 3 or 4 guys, and the only player capable of getting sacks was Josh Sweat and Walter Nolan for like 3 weeks. And that to me, like, I know Gannon wasn't calling plays. I honestly feel like that was being communicated from the top down. I feel like Rallis was, to a certain extent, being limited by what Gannon wanted to do as an organizational philosophy, not in a schematic sense, but as this is what we are, this is our identity. Our identity is bend but don't break. I've said it so many times, that doesn't work ever. The bend but don't break. Like, I hate when people say this,
especially with no offense.
Well, exactly. But I've always hated this when it was bend but don't break. Back when I think it was like the Tom Brady days of the Patriots, and Matt Patricia was their defensive coordinator. One of the things they used to say all the time was, "Oh, he's bend but don't break. This is a bend but don't break defense." And they were getting lit up every single week, but then like somebody was making a crazy play at the very end. You can't live on that. You just can't. That defense gave up 41 points to the Eagles in the Super Bowl and lost after like I'm getting way off on a tangent here. I hate when people say,
I love it.
I hate bend but don't break. That is not sustainable. And I think that came from Gannon more so than Rallis. I could be wrong, but I'm interested to see what happens when Rallis is kind of the senior coach on the defense.
Yeah, and that's maybe that's maybe the big turning point for Rallis, is he's not going to have Gannon looking over his shoulder. And while Gannon didn't call plays, like it's going to be fully Rallis's show. I think my only drawback, Alex, is Rallis came up under Gannon, very much under the same philosophy, the same schematics. Like, I'm so curious to see how different this defense looks in like the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season compared to the last 3 years. Because like, obviously Gannon having his background, like he had a hand in implementing stuff like that's no question. But in terms of like, gotta have it downs and scenarios and like fourth quarter defense, like you talked about, like it was Rallis, from my understanding, pulling the trigger on all of those key situational things. I'm just curious, because even if it is Rallis by himself, which it will be, how much is going to change? Because like, he's not going to just completely overhaul everything from the last 3 years. So I'm just so curious to see what the defense looks like. But like for Rallis, the players love him. Yeah. The players love him. Like, you're getting some sort of like continuity between this like mesh point of old coaches and new coaches coming in. And it's going to be like an interesting year in Arizona. He's well respected. Like the players like him, but players loved and respected Jonathan Gannon too. And like, they still canned him. But I can't help but feel, with Fry returning, with Nick Rallis returning, I can't help but feel this feels like a money thing. Because Rallis was already under contract. Fry was already under contract. Bidwell's going to be paying 3 coaches on top of, if he has to, assuming a large debt in Kyler Murray's potential departure this offseason. Does Bidwell want to fire a new position coach and then hire a new one for 2 separate positions on a coaching staff already? It's just from that standpoint, and the trying to interview a whole bunch of other defensive coordinators to eventually just come back to square one, where they could have just stuck with him from the beginning and made his process entirely different and smoother. That's what screams out to me. So
yeah, that's the biggest issue. That's by far the biggest issue.
Brian, I'm gonna get your Venmo and send you that $20 back. That's wild, man. And then started late, but why can't the Cardinals get Jim Schwartz? because they couldn't get Gus Bradley. They couldn't get anybody else.
We don't know if they even tried to talk to him.
I will say, man, they kept things so under wraps this entire process that, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they did talk to him and we just didn't know about it. Because, like, how many guys did they speak to and we didn't learn until after the fact?
Now, here's something I'll say. Here's something I'll say about the Rallis situation. So he's still under contract for 1 year. They didn't extend him. They're retaining him. He's under contract for 1 year. So that means that unless the defense improves, they're going to move on from him. That's just a given, especially considering that Gannon is not in charge anymore. Number two, what was the biggest problem with Jonathan Gannon? The number one biggest issue and the number one reason why Jonathan Gannon was ultimately fired. He wouldn't part with assistant coaches who couldn't get the job done. Okay, so Mike LaFleur knows he's got a couple years, right? They're not going to fire him after 1 year. Doesn't matter how bad they are. They're probably not going to fire him after 2 years unless it was a complete disaster. So Mike LaFleur has some stability and confidence in his own job. Is he going to be able to make the tough decisions he needs to make if things aren't going well with his assistant staff? I would like to think so. More so than Gannon, you don't know. That was the biggest problem with Gannon, was he was too loyal to his guys who couldn't get the job done, specifically Drew Petzing, but to an extent Rallis as well. I think at best, like, Rallis either improves and stays and the defense gets better, or it doesn't improve, he's gone automatically, and the defense hopefully gets better. Is he going to get pulled off of play calling duties mid-season? Is LaFleur going to move off of coach? Like, we don't know any of that yet. So to assume that we're just stuck with 2025's defensive output is not necessarily, I think, where we want to be living or assuming is going to happen.
Yeah, I think the defense naturally is going to improve too. Like, there's no way, unless there's like an electromagnetic field by the practice facility, there's no way the injuries are going to keep up in 2026. Yeah, it just might be. So like, they're going to get better. They're going to get more talented. And I don't know, man. I think Rallis had a pretty solid first year, a very good second year, and a very disappointing third year. Like, he's very much a mixed bag at this point. But like, we see the potential. He was getting head coach shouts. He didn't get interviews, but like, heading into 2025, there was a very big belief that if the Cardinals defense performed to expectations like they were supposed to, Rallis would have been gone, taking at least like head coaching interviews.
Yep.
That obviously was not the case. Like, they kept him on staff, and maybe that happens next year, maybe that happens the year after. But like, Rallis very much is entering like, hey man, like, you have to prove something here. You absolutely, like, you got to change something. Like, there's something has to give, because you cannot run it back with the same mindset and the same philosophy. I don't care how many good players are on that roster. Like, something has to change. And apparently they're confident in Nick Rallis to do so.
Yeah. I'll say it again. He's had more seasons, more games worth of success than failure. Let's not get too crazy with using 2025 as the example, but the process and how they landed back with him is the worst part of this.
If this would have been announced like mid-January,
or
even like right after,
I would have been like, fine. Yeah,
I'd be like, okay, like, I get it. But it's like you weren't even so sure of Rallis that you had to talk to other coordinators, man. And you got rejected by other coordinators. Like, this feels like you were backed into a corner. This is not a good look for them. Like, at
absolutely.
all. Like Rallis himself as a coordinator, what we've seen good and bad. It's been a mixed bag. We've established that. But like, from a Cardinals perspective, to have like walked backwards into Mike LaFleur and then walked backwards into Nick Rallis, when both of them are like fairly respectable moves in their own rights, I can't get on board with it, man. Alex, let's get to the chat really quick before we head into our last segment. Apparently, the Seahawks are interviewing our pass game specialist for their OC position, and Aubrey Pleasant is now interviewing with the Raiders for their defensive coordinator spot. So just a little nugget for everybody. Hank says, good thinking. Probably be a better crop of options for DC after next year if it doesn't work out. Who knows? Rafa, thanks for checking us out, my man. If tomorrow they sign Wink Martindale as assistant coach, nobody cares that they kept Rallis because there is a vision. Can be chose Rallis again. John coming back. It's just so odd to have 2 good years of Rallis where he was creative and innovative with the pass rushers that were terrible down here despite spending the whole offseason upgrading the offense. Exactly. I'm not going to bring up Brian's comment or the other comments in the chat as well. Moving on to a more lighthearted topic, Alex. The NFLPA report cards are no longer after the NFL won a grievance. Is that what the cool kids call it? Basically saying, hey, man, like you're calling us out for not having everything, for all of our like shortcomings being shown to light. For people who weren't familiar, this has been done the last 2 years by the NFLPA, normally revealed around the NFL Combine, where the NFLPA would poll players across the league to rate everything from ownership to head coach to how they treated everybody's families to training facilities like food courts, like everything you could think of that would matter to you as a player. They graded their own teams on a to F scale. And a lot of owners didn't necessarily like it. And Alex, you had brought up a good point before we even hit the record button on who is leading the charge and possibly why.
That would be one Woody Johnson from the superior organization that is the New York Jets, and clearly the most favorite owner in the league. So he said, I am tired of being given bad grades, so we should just get rid of them. Which sounds a lot like, you know, what your kid might say if he's getting bad grades in school. I don't know.
Well, I think a certain owner in Arizona is going to be happy as well.
Probably.
Alex, the Arizona Cardinals did not grade very well at all whenever it came to the NFLPA report cards. And if people remember last year, after the Cardinals finished 32nd out of 32 NFL teams, the Cardinals immediately after announced that they were building that new facility in 2028. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That was a good time. And for people who aren't really aware of how the Cardinals did on the NFLPA grades last year, like I said a little bit earlier, they ranked 32nd out of 32 NFL teams. The Cardinals, they finished last. They ranked near the bottom in league categories such as treatment of families, food and dining area, training room, training staff, weight room, strength coaches, and ownership.
Yep. I mean, okay, the one thing I'll say, Michael Bidwell did take all of that, I guess, to heart because they're working on improving it. They're building the new facility. They're adding all these improvements. That's good. I'm glad that happened before they got rid of the report cards. This is a bad look for the NFL. I'm sorry. This is just bad.
Terrible look. And
yeah, I mean, that's what it is. And I'm never one for like, I will oftentimes say like, okay, the players need to like deal with certain stuff when you're getting paid that much money. But this is different. This is the, like Brian is saying, the billionaires who can easily afford to make improvements or to not charge players for food and like all of like childcare and all of that stuff. Like that shouldn't be happening. It just, and to take away the player's ability to it's not about taking away their ability to say something, the ability to do it collectively and anonymously. That is the problem. Because you lose all of that power when it's just you complaining on Twitter, because then everyone's going to have an opinion. If someone says, oh, my owner treated me poorly, well, you're wrong, or what. It's like, no, it was an avenue for the players to do it collectively and without, I guess, input from the outside world.
Maybe the real report cards were the friends we make along the way, Alex.
Maybe the real training staff in the facility were the friends we made along the way.
All right, man. Let's get out of here. Where can people find you at, Alex?
Find me at gophnx.com. Find my Diamondbacks work at Diamondbacks on SI. Follow me on Twitter at AlexDagAZ.
You can follow me on Twitter at Don Drew and follow I work at SL.com/NFL/Cardinals. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will be back a little bit sometime soon to recap all the coaching staff changes and all of the other fun stuff happening in the Valley. But